All right, let's jump right into it today. We're taking a deep dive into, well, some pretty choppy waters in South Korean politics. We're looking at this whole attempted arrest of President Yoon Suk-yeol thing. It's been a wild ride just following the news. And with this stack of legal analyses and the political commentary, too. It seems like there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation when you look at it through that lens of, how do legal processes and political strategy clash?
Okay, so for our listeners who maybe haven't been glued to this story, can we set the scene a bit? Like, who are the major players in this whole drama?
Well, obviously, I've got President Yoon right at the center of it. And then you have the high-ranking officials' crime investigation office. That's the PPO. They're supposed to be this independent body keeping corruption in check. But, their actions in this whole thing have kind of put a spotlight on just what their role and their power really are,
And, I mean, it's not just them, is it? You get the police, the courts, specifically the Western District Court. It's a whole tangle of institutions. So what makes this arrest attempt so different? I mean, it's not like you see a sitting president facing arrest every day.
Absolutely not. It's incredibly rare. And to make it even more peculiar, you have to remember that in South Korea, a president actually can't be prosecuted for abuse of power while they're in office. A lot of legal experts have really been emphasizing that point, which makes you wonder, well, what exactly was the PPO thinking?
Yeah, it's almost like they were trying to find a loophole or something. You mentioned some concerns about the PPO's jurisdiction, particularly when it comes to these sedition charges. Can you explain that a little more?
Sure. So sedition, that falls under the jurisdiction of the police, not the PPO. It's like, imagine a meter maid trying to, arrest an international smuggler or something. It's not their area.
So how did the PPO even try to justify getting involved then?
Their argument was that they could basically expand the scope of an abuse of power investigation to include sedition, which honestly a lot of people see as a complete misreading of their authority. It comes across as, them really wanting to go after President Yoon, even if it meant bending the rules to do it.
Like trying to force a square block into a round hole definitely raises some eyebrows. What about the warrant itself? Was there anything unusual about how that was issued or handled?
Oh, absolutely. So in Korean law, military installations and the presidential office, those are considered secure areas, and warrant execution is specifically prohibited in those places.
So even if the PPO did have the authority, they couldn't have just gone in and arrested the president there anyway.
Exactly. But here's the really strange part. The judge who reviewed the warrant, they totally ignored those legal protections and issued it anyway.
Okay, that seems like a pretty big overstep, especially with everything else going on. What was the reaction to that?
Well, you had a lot of legal experts and commentators who saw it as basically ignoring the law, It raised serious concerns about the judge's impartiality and whether there was some kind of bias going on.
Hold on, we got to back up a sec. You said the warrant came from the Western District Court. Is there a reason that's important?
Yeah, that's a key detail. That court, it's known to have connections to people associated with the Democratic Party and progressive legal groups.
So the choice of court itself adds another layer to all this. It makes it look like maybe the PPO was, judge shopping a bit, hoping to get a result that favored them.
That's certainly the impression it gives, right? And it really fuels this whole idea that the PPO is being used as a political weapon, basically. It makes the whole situation feel less about upholding the law and more about, political games.
So we've got this arrest attempt with some shaky legal ground, a warrant that shouldn't have been issued, and a court with possible political ties.
Yeah, that's a recipe for controversy for sure. This brings us to, the PPO themselves. Who are they and what are they really after?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
On paper, the PPO is supposed to be independent, free from political influence, and focused on rooting out corruption at the highest levels.
So the good guys, the watchdogs, keeping the powerful in check.
Exactly. But then you look at what they did here, and it raises so many questions about their competence, their understanding of the law, even their supposed neutrality.
And what about the effect on President Yoon himself? Did this attempted arrest weaken his standing at all?
Well, that's the surprising part. Actually, his approval ratings went up after this whole thing.
Wait, really? That doesn't seem like it makes sense. Why would people rally behind a leader who's facing arrest? It's a curious twist, for sure. But when you look at the public sentiment, you start to see a clearer picture. So yeah, it seems like people saw this whole thing, this whole arrest attempt, as a bit of an overreach. but not on President Yoon's part.
So they were more upset with the PPO.
Yeah, a lot of folks saw their actions as politically motivated, especially with, that whole judge shopping thing and the questionable legal grounds we talked about.
So it kind of blew up in their faces, huh? They were trying to discredit President Yoon, but it ended up making them look bad.
Pretty much. And the South Korean public, they're pretty sharp. They have a strong sense of fairness, and they don't like to see political manipulation. This incident really tapped into that.
So it wasn't so much about supporting Yoon himself, but more about seeing him as the target of, like, a dirty political play.
That's a great way to put it. It seems the public was more focused on the process, the way things were done, rather than the individual involved. They saw a system being twisted for political gain, and, well, that didn't sit well with them.
It says a lot about the people, They're not just blindly following along. They're paying attention to the details, the legal stuff, and forming their own opinions.
Exactly. They weren't just buying what the PPO or their allies were selling. They were thinking for themselves.
It's almost like this whole thing became a trial in the court of public opinion, not just for President Yoon, but for the PPO and the whole legal system.
That's a really powerful way to look at it. And in that court, the PPO definitely lost. Their credibility took a serious hit, and it'll be interesting to see how they try to bounce back from this.
It really highlights how important public perception is in politics. It doesn't matter what the actual facts are if people believe something else entirely.
You hit the nail on the head. And in this case, the way the PPO handled things created this image of them being biased, overreaching, and playing political games. That's not an easy thing to shake off.
This has been a fascinating look into this whole attempted arrest situation, and it's clear that it goes so much deeper than just one event. We've uncovered some serious tension and potential cracks in the system. What are your final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up this part of the discussion?
I think this whole situation really underscores how fragile trust is in democratic institutions. When people feel like those institutions are acting unfairly or for political gain, it erodes their faith in the entire system, and that's a very dangerous road to go down.
So we spent the last couple parts really digging into this President Yoon arrest attempt, and it's pretty obvious that the ripple effects are, well, they're pretty huge. It feels like we've pulled back the curtain on some serious tension and maybe even some weaknesses in South Korea's political system.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's like this situation has become a bit of a case study in how delicate the balance of power can be in a democracy and how quickly things can get messed up when you lose that essential element of trust.
One thing that's really stayed with me is how the South Korean public reacted to all this. It was almost like they turned this into a judgment on the PPO and the justice system as a whole.
It's amazing, isn't it? They weren't fooled by the political games, and they basically delivered their own verdict. It shows how much they care, how involved they are, and that they won't just sit back and watch when they see something wrong happening.
It also makes you wonder about what happens to the PPO now. Their reputation's taken a big hit. Some people are even saying they should be completely abolished. What needs to happen to get that public trust back?
That's the big question, right? I think there needs to be some serious soul-searching within the PPO. They have to look at what they did, admit where they went wrong, and show that they're really committed to fixing things.
What would that look like? Would it be about making their jurisdiction clearer or putting in stronger oversight? Or is it something totally different?
It'll probably involve a lot of different pieces. They definitely need clear rules about what they can and can't do, that's for sure. More transparency in how they operate would help a lot, too, because that would address those concerns about bias and being influenced by politics. And they need some solid accountability mechanisms, both from inside the PPO and from outside, to make sure they're actually following the law.
It feels like this whole attempted arrest thing has really highlighted the need for checks and balances, not just for the PPO, but for the whole South Korean political system.
Absolutely. This whole thing is a wake-up call. It shows that no institution, no matter how good its intentions are, is immune to the allure of power. You know, you need safeguards in place to make sure that power isn't abused.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the key takeaways you want to leave our listeners with? This is a complicated story, for sure.
Well, first of all, I think it shows how important it is for citizens to be informed and to get involved. What happened here with the attempted arrest, it shows that the public has the power to really change things. They didn't just believe everything they heard. They questioned it. They thought about it critically. And in the end, they held those in power accountable.
It's a great reminder that democracy needs active citizens, people who don't just vote, but who actually think for themselves, challenge authority, and demand that those in power answer for their actions.
You said it perfectly. And the second thing is, well, this situation really shows us how delicate trust is, especially trust in institutions. You have to earn that trust through transparency, fairness, and showing that you're committed to the rule of law. When those things break down, the whole system suffers.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the attempted arrest of President Yoon Suk-yeol. It's a story full of twists and turns, and it started some really important conversations about the future of South Korea's political landscape. Thanks for joining us on this journey. We appreciate you listening.